thank you for all the panelists. I'm very happy to be with you today and to be able to introduce your work and talk about it a bit later. This panel has like 4 projects or 4 institutions that revolve around their work. They work with the moving image in different ways. You can say there's kind of a bit of a split between 2 projects that come from cinema and use cinema, the format of cinema as we know it, but more interested in the kind of art house productions. And 2 other projects that come more from contemporary art background, languages, audiences, but all projects kind of strive to go beyond their designated circles or to go beyond the kind of infrastructures of their cities and to expand both the producers and receivers of the mediums that they're interested in. We will start by going through the presentations. Like we will start with Butheina Kazim and Cinema Akil. So she will talk to us a bit about her project.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm usually operating in the evening, so this is. I'm going to share with you a short presentation about Cinema Akil and what we do, just to show the range of different things that we're involved in.
And just as an introduction, Cinema Akil was started in 2014 in Dubai. And there has been kind of different stages of their work, which Butheina will talk to us about, from a more nomadic kind of existence to a more settled existence that will start soon, no?
Yes, exactly. So we've been on a journey for the past, now 4 years, actually. We started in July 2014 in a very small screening series at the Third Line Gallery in Al-Koz in their older space. And that's essentially where the whole project came to life. So we're an independent cinema. We aspire to be the Gulf's first art house independent cinema space, focused on bringing critically acclaimed and alternative forms of film that don't get a lot of theatrical space outside of the film festival. And that's how we started. We've had over 40 pop-ups, so we exist in our nomadic space across different locations and different takeovers. We've had a turnout of 35,000 people across the country, and now we're working towards building our upcoming space, our home. So this is sort of our trajectory so far. We started as a pop-up, and we continue to operate as a pop-up. So if you're in Abu Dhabi on Wednesday, you'll be able to see one of our programs at Warehouse 421, focused on contemporary Arab cinema. We ran a beta test version of the brick and mortar establishment over the summer. It was a very rough and ready kind of experiment in negotiating what an art house cinema space could look like in the context of Al Sarkal Avenue and the context of the larger art scene.
Maybe you can tell us a bit about Al Sarkal Avenue just so people know like the context where you are.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Al Sarkal Avenue is a cluster of warehouses. It's a privately owned plot of warehouses that are specifically purpose-built for use by arts and creative enterprises. So it houses everything from hipster coffee shops and chocolate factories, which are great, and commercial art galleries like the Third Line, like Layla Heller, Grey Noise, and some others. There's a community theater, and we will be the art house cinema space there. So it's a cluster that holds a captive audience, that we're sort of trying to, across the board, cater to, and creates a lot of room for collaboration, which is why we decided to be there. It's also in the heart of an industrial area, so it has a different kind of navigational experience, an experiential experience, and it's heavily pedestrian on good days.
And the space itself was also like a warehouse space, or before you worked on it, or what
Yeah.
kind of space was it?
I'll show you some images of what the sort of the space will look like, or that beta version. I mean, this little image here shows a little bit of what that looks like. But essentially, it's warehouses, that are 3,000 square foot warehouses that have been transformed into different spaces. And that's where we're going to be permanently based. So this is one of the images of our opening night. We looked at sort of the landscape of what's available here, and we really felt like there was something to be done on the art house front. We have a lot of multiplexes, if you know the UAE at all. So there's a lot of mall-based multiplexes that offer a huge kind of commercial programming realm, and it's increasing now in its art house offering and its independence, and I think that's a great thing. But we felt that there was some room to do something that was also outside of the realm of the multiplex kind of experience, and allowing people to kind of sit with the films a little bit more spatially as well. Hence the project. We like to think of ourselves as close in some way to Sharjah Art Foundation and their public programming here at the Miraj City Cinema. If anybody has anybody been there, the Miraj City Cinema? Yeah, I mean it's one of my favorite places in the country, for showing films like this, but also in the way that cinema can function outside of the realm of exhibition, and the kind of integration with the community that the cinema is based in. Our programming is a wide range, and we like to experiment and not really limit ourselves within certain understandings of what art house or independent cinema looks like. So we do everything from repertory to a big focus on contemporary Arab cinema, world cinema, whatever that means. It's a very problematic term, but cinema at large, and documentaries and cult classics. So I'll just tell you a little bit about where we have sort of been and tried and failed. So 4 years, we've been around for 4 years. We've done 40 pop-ups, and what that means, 40 pop-ups, is it's everything from a single screening to a series of 10 films across a few months, but the actual program number is 40.
And these are by invitation, or like you take the initiative to go somewhere, or you are invited by another?
Both, all of the above. We function in a lot of different ways. So sometimes we're invited to, as a commission, to run a film program. Sometimes we try to infiltrate a certain space and a conversation, and sometimes it's a landlord-tenant type of relationship where we rent out a space, such as the case in El Sarkal Avenue. So we have a lot of different formats of working, which I'll share with you in a bit. So these are just some of the numbers. We are also a proud member of the network of Arab alternative screens, of which Metropolis is also a member. And it's a sort of a consortium, a membership, sort of a professional organization across 12 different countries, ranging from Tangier to Khartoum to Beirut, Metropolis, Zawiya in Cairo, and others.
It's a network of independent Arab screens, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, some of them are standalone, which you'll hear about, from Hania, the Metropolis, as a standalone, a dedicated art house space. The Sudan Film Factory, which is another member, is nomadic in their structure, similar to us. So there's a lot of different types of format, but essentially there are screens that are dedicated to films that are, considered art house or alternative or experiment or parallel. So the temporal nomadic life that we've been living for the past 4 years looks something like this. We have programs ranging from ongoing series where we're commissioned by spaces such as Al Sarkal Avenue. This is Mushrif Central Park in Abu Dhabi. That's Warehouse 421 in Abu Dhabi as well. And there are more. These are usually invitations to run an ongoing series that works with the indigenous programming of the institution. And we put together a lineup of films and talks and so on related to that. So those can go up to 6 months. Usually they're very tied to the outdoor season, because that's something to be relished in this part of the world, and that's something we do regularly, and it allows us to stay alive essentially in the absence of a home or a brick and mortar space. We've done a cine concert as well, so these are sort of the large scale kind of bigger production projects. This was a cine concert a year ago now at Meet D3, Dubai Design District. Where we
What's a cine concert?
A cine concert is a live performance, a musical performance against a silent film. It's sort of a reinterpretation of the score, and or sometimes an original score. In this case, it was a lot of improv and original composition. We had 3 DJs and 5 performances for performers from techno shabby sort of band in Egypt that worked on sort of imagining Metropolis in its revolutionary forms. We do a lot of events-based tie-ups, so those are the sort of the realities of existing in a city, or in a way the sort of hijacking potential of cinema. We work with a lot of events, or 10-day events and markets, and sort of traditionally more commercial realms, and we kind of come in there, parachute a film program that is within the space of independent and alternative, to introduce a different kind of conversation even in those spaces. So this is sort of a market outside the box, and that's Sikka Art Fair, which is going on now. It's a couple of years ago at the Fahidi Historical District in Dubai. This is Soul DXB, which is a sort of a hip-hop sneaker convention. It's a it's a trade-based market, but it also allows us to do a lot of to present a lot of films which otherwise, even in the space of an art house cinema, would find its challenges attracting these audiences into a place like Sarkal Avenue. So we get to tap into a completely different market and possibly create interest that trickles over. We also do mini festivals. We're sometimes commissioned, or we work with partners to put on mini festivals, such as the Image Nations on Arab Geographies program, which was a program of 8 films over a weekend, where we were able to invite filmmakers and present films that didn't really get any kind of theatrical space here, and so on. And we do some co-programming as well, where we partner with existing festivals and spaces, such as this one, which is, again, my favorite venue, the Sharjah Art Foundation Mirage City Cinema program. We did a Arab sci-fi program, which was a 4-film program across 3 months. And the Real Palestine Film Festival, which is very dear to our heart. It's been our 4th year presenting the festival, which is the only festival of Palestinian film, believe it or not, in this part of the world. So we do things like that. And the beta cinema. So the beta cinema sort of test theory, was set up to kind of, and I think you had a chance to come by one of the screenings, and it was just to see the validity or the function of a space like this in the context of Dubai. It was our first ticketed, our paid cinema space. So that also allowed us to see the sustainability of such an endeavor. So we had a program of 6 weeks with 35 films. We had about 6,000 rounded up attendees. We did a lot of premieres of films that otherwise would have gone to VOD, so we were very lucky in the kind of content we had access to. We had a lot of guest speakers. We invited people from different sort of spaces and communities to be involved with the films, and so on. And this is sort of what it looked like. So there was not a single thing that was tacked onto the walls of the warehouse. Everything was sort of like a theater set, which essentially this was. It was acoustically not exactly up to a cinema standard, but it was something that allowed us to show these films and to continuously operate on a daily basis and see how that works. These are some of the films that we were able to premiere, including Tamer Saeed's Akhir Ayam al-Madina, or In the Last Days of the City, which was a film that didn't get any kind of theatrical release here or even in Egypt. Mm-hmm. So we were very fortunate to be able to do that. Films like I Am Not Your Negro, the Raoul Peck film, Loving Vincent, which brought us our biggest attendance throughout the program, and so on. And this is where we're heading. So our brick and mortar space, which is hopefully, inshallah, set to launch in June. And it will be an extension of the beta cinema. So essentially what we learned was, it would be a much more effective transition to continue on this trajectory of slow moving change rather than a direct kind of intervention or institutional setup. So we would just kind of, make more permanent interventions on the space. And these are some of the images that are aspirational. Don't hold me to any of these standards. It's a very dusty area. We sit next to a gas chamber, so, you know. Yeah, gas, whatever it's called, the closet. So, you know, it's a very precarious way of existing. Even our stadium, our seating is not staggered. It's not a stadium seating. It's sort of inspired by like the large living room majlis way of consuming film in this part of the world. And we have a small chai diner.
This is what I saw. So this is what exists now, right? And then you're gonna expand, or you're gonna be just more settled in that space.
So what you saw was sort of the preview of it, which is here, which is sort of a rougher version of what we're working towards. So, you know, the change would be just, you know, a few technical sort of upgrades, a more permanent setup, a automated ticketing system, more comfortable chairs, and so on. So things like that would just kind of elevate the experience and make it more permanent and make it more resilient, I guess, structurally. And that would be the home of Cinema Akil, the HQ. But we will continue to run our parallel pop-up nomadic programs, because that's something that has become integral and essential to the work that we do. But perhaps it allows us a little bit more longevity and also commercial sustainability to have a base. Yeah, I'll just show a few more images, and there'll be a small, you know, necessary replenishment station, a chai diner. And these are the neighbors that I talked about earlier. So we'll share, you know, space and walls with partners that we could really work with on presenting other films that, you know, otherwise in a nomadic format wouldn't function. And yeah, this is pretty much it. And I'll share a small video, maybe if just of the making of the impermanent space, or the semi-permanent space, which we worked on with two artists based here in Dubai, Chindi and Shab Moha, and we kind of gave them the warehouse to interpret, you know, what would a low-budget, you know, Khaliji-based cinema look like, and how would it, you know, feel, and what are the furniture sort of choices, and, you know, the spatial choices, and so on that would go in there. So it's kind of hilarious. So it's in Arabic, so you might want to put on your headphones for some parts.
يلا 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 اركب.
عندنا 10 صبر عندنا 10 عندنا 9 أيام نبني السينما.
رح نبني السينما انا وتشندي.
جاي روح خذ الكرسي.
الشمس جميلة.
ايش؟
الشمس جميلة.
ايوه سينما عقيل كلموني عشان نصمم المكان الجديد. الو ممكن ترسلي لي تعريف سينما عقيل بالواتساب؟ اوكي عن سينما عقيل هي منصة مستقلة للأفلام الفنية والبديلة تتيح للجمهور الفرصة لمشاهدة نوعية مختلفة من الأفلام العالمية. تهدف سينما عقيل إلى رفع الوعي والاهتمام بالفيلم والفنون السينمائية. أطلقت سينما عقيل في عام 2014 كسينما راحلة. هذا سينما عقيل. يلا
I told you about the 2 walls, the 2 walls.
Yeah, I know.
I gave you quotation about the 2 walls.
Okay. Okay, I know. That's why I'm calling to do extra.
Okay, I will bring something extra.
Okay, yalla, I love you.
I love you too.
Bye.
كيف؟ وين رايحين الحين؟
5 ساعات كامل.
كم ساعة نمنا أمس؟
3 ولا 4 ساعات. اول شيء هنا المدخل، هنا بيكون ريسبشن،
صح.
بيكون في صبر هنا بيكون كافيه. ايش؟ بقالة.
لا بقالة.
اي.
استراحة يعني.
ما استراحة، هنا بيبيعوا شيبس واشياء.
استراحة for people to come هنا يدوروا.
لا هنا ذكي.
في ميرش.
هنا في قمصان. أكل. بعدين
هنا مسكر في باب.
ما باب، ستارة.
لا هذا ستارة. لا هنا ستارة.
نو بوث يا ذكي. هنا بلاك اوت.
بلاك اوت هنا اوكي.
بلاك اوت. شوف هنا مكتوب لك ازرق. جيب تعطيني شوية. هنا بس هنا يعني ساعة. ما أعرف اليوم الثاني ولا الثالث ولا الرابع، بس يمكن قربنا نخلص بس ما متأكد.
كل زين سلطان الحمد لله، كله زين مياه هنا. أنا أشرب شاي ترتيب جديد إن شاء الله، فريش ميلك فريش شاي. أوكي. سلام.
شوف على ما تكسر بابا شو ولا
إيش؟
ليش؟
إيش هذا يكسر؟
هذا في كسر على نفر.
وين ما كسر من اول هذا كذا.
لا هذا ما في، انت كسر. يا محمد هذا كسر بعد المشكله. خلاص محمد نزل تعال.
نبيت.
إيش صار؟
هنقول.
جابوا كاربت غلط، الحين بنتأخر يومين. نبيل
He will come within
ليش انت يجيب غلط؟
he will come. ليش that is completely different.
جاب the wrong color. قلت لك غلط.
انا حسيت كذا.
ايه ليش why did you ignore me؟ قلت لك غلط.
Sorry.
ليش تجيب غلط انت؟
That is company color.
ليش انت ما تشيك؟
خلاص لازم نسوي 50 درهم.
ديسكاونت.
No, he will come.
لا انت يقول الساعة 3، الحين الساعة 6 ويجيب غلط.
انت قلت الساعة 9 8 يخلص، يمكن بعد 20 years ما يخلص انت. خلاص.
قول سوري.
Sorry.
سوري.
I'm very sorry.
قول ما راح تعيدها مرة
Extremely
ثانية.
sorry.
extremely sorry.
Say you won't do it again.
Within 1 hour I will clear. I will come.
يلا 1 hour ها. صديق هذا اشوف اخيرا.
ايش يلا مو كيف حالك؟ حبيبي ايش كيف؟ يلا شباب حرك ايوه. اوكي guys let's no let's be serious please. Whoa. What the hell is what's going on? What's going on?
الحين نجيب بوسترات قديمة. That'd be cool. Look, paste on top.
Wow, look at this, man.
Hey, that's a lot.
عادي, we'll move it away.
Look, this is me.
اشوف. يلا. And then you need to do a layer on top.
Yes, I know.
ايش صاير؟
والله ما اعرفش، انا تعبان قوي.
ايش؟
تعبان قوي عايز اروح. يا اولاد حصل يا سليمان. ايه خلصوا ان شاء الله. خلصوا العيال دول، خليهم يخلصوا. يلا خلص. ما اعرفش اللي بيعملوه ده. يلا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. اليوم صديق من أنا هنا، كيف حال؟
الحمد لله.
إيش أنت يسوي هنا؟
ولا أنا أجيب سامان مال عجمان ودبي.
يسوي السينما.
هذا عشان السينما.
ايش اسم سينما عقيل؟
السينما أكيد. أكيل ولا أكيد؟
عقيل.
أكيل.
ايوه سينما كويس 100 100.
100 100 حلوة. دراما مظبوط.
ايش دراما؟
دايلك واجد مظبوط. أنا
ايش دايلك؟
دايلك مال داخل فيلم.
انت معلومه مثل؟
ايه 100
زين سوي اكتنج ناو.
يلا
ليش كذا ليش؟ ما حد يموت كذا. يلا 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 يلا. بسم الله بسم الله بسم الله شوي شوي.
واو
واو
شكرا. وانا
من وين جيت انت؟
تعال فتح السينما امشي.
أول ما تدخل السينما هنا في محل كرك. ايش؟
حبيب
ايش؟ اوه ايش هذا؟ ايش هذا؟
واو كرك.
المهم في محل كرك هنا، في هنا بقالة، أكيد في شيبس عمان، هنا في بوب كورن وأشياء. بعدين
If there's an ending that you want to, if there's a specific thing at the end that you want to show, or if that's fine, yeah.
Pretty much it, yeah.
Okay.
Covers the whole.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Wait. Maybe no. Yeah. Maybe Yaminay first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah.
No. You want to sit there? Just have your first.
Yeah. I kind of. So Yaminay Chaudhri is a multimedia artist and a co-founder of the collective, the Tentative Collective, which is a collective, as far as I understand, that is mainly formed by artists, but also they work with a wide group of people, not just artists, so artists, scholars, teachers, I guess a variety of professionals, non-professionals, depending on the project. And they work in Karachi mainly. And yeah, Yaminay will tell us more about the Tentative Collective and of a specific project that they did, the Mera Karachi Mobile Cinema.
Hi, thank you for having us. It's lovely to be here. I'm going to share a pretty straightforward text. I'm sorry, my reading extempore can be kind of strange, but apologies in advance. Anyway, I just wanted to share an idea that started in 2011 about how we came to be and how the Tentative Collective was formed. A group of us were protesting the privatization of a park in Karachi, a park that was open and free to public for decades. And one fine day, it got surrounded by a beautiful wall, a gate, and ticketed entry. And we felt like even though the tickets were cheap, a lot of people were excluded from that park. And that day, on I think the 24th of December, we decided to sit on top of that wall, about 50 of us, and mark the presence of that wall as a kind of collective action. Maybe you could think of it as a protest, but we just had conversations and drank tea, things we would do inside the park. And a reporter came by and asked if we had a name and who we were. And that day, on the spur of the moment, the Tentative Collective was born as a sort of a constellation of people from different backgrounds. You don't have to be an artist, you don't have to be somebody who is interested in making art per se, but people interested in the city and responding to the city in some way based on very diverse lived experiences of Karachi. We would share resources, things that each of us could offer, and most importantly, we would sort of share ownership of the projects under the name Tentative Collective. And anybody could propose an idea, and if there were enough people interested in doing that idea, a group would form around it, and then that would be the Tentative Collective. So I will actually share one of our projects called Mera Karachi Mobile Cinema that ran from 2012 to 2015 in Karachi. And it involved, it was a long-term project that sort of came from this notion, this feeling of isolation in urban settings, a feeling that we were being sort of inundated with images, sound bites, sort of stereotypical representations of people in the city by mass media, that American imperialism combined with our own state's collusion in the wars on terror, even cultural producers were sort of presenting these essentialized representations of entire classes and ethnicities of people in the city. And there were all of these sort of binary identity politics that were kind of arising in the city. And my own neighborhood that I grew up in when I returned to Pakistan from the States had turned into a complete fortress. Our neighbors were no longer meeting like they used to. And this is a middle-class neighborhood that's very vibrant when I was growing up. And the sort of mohalla dads who used to be on garden chairs had receded into bedrooms that were lit by television screens. And there was just that kind of sociality on the street had changed, and the street had kind of become parking space for cars, and that was its sort of role, more than anything. So we started Mera Karachi Mobile Cinema as a sort of response to this isolation of not knowing your neighbors, not knowing people in the city, and feeling like you were sort of siloed indoors somehow, and a kind of feeling that space was being sort of commodified, privatized, and given specific roles. Like you go to a park to drink tea and have conversations, you go to a theater to watch a movie, you drive your car on the street, but that there was the flexibility that's so kind of local to Karachi, that's so sort of, that the spirit of Karachi was kind of changing with development and progress and modernity. So in this project, we started gathering and projecting homemade cell phone films in the neighborhoods where they were produced, using a makeshift rickshaw-powered projector that was completely off the grid because electricity is sort of hit or miss. And most importantly, we did this by spending months of time in each neighborhood, and we worked all across the city. We collaborated with various residents of Karachi that were sort of in peripheral neighborhoods, and we initially started with the prompt, what do you do in your free time? And so people responded to that in various different ways, and as the project proceeded, we actually kind of moved away from that prompt altogether, and depending on what people in each neighborhood wanted to make, they started making things. So instead of it being individual one-person films, sometimes a group of people would just decide to work together and make films together. And all of these films were made using cell phones. And this idea that that storytelling can be done without using expensive tools and fancy cameras, that, at that time in 2011, 2012, when we were thinking about this project, things had changed drastically in South Asia, in Karachi in particular. There had been a huge influx of phones since the 2000s as markets were liberalized, courtesy of Pervez Musharraf, who had been there about 9 years earlier. And with the sort of opening of markets and the sort of flow of capital, of global capital, Karachi was participating in this kind of speedy flow of capital and kind of becoming very aspirational as a sort of global city or world city. And cell phones were kind of this marker of progress, or this marker of modernity as they were entering Karachi. And by 2012, almost everyone, if not every family, everyone had a cell phone. And it was this sort of medium that was very accessible, easy to use, and had these incredible capabilities that in some parts of the city had the potential of slowing down this flow of capital. And that potential was what was interesting in Mera Karachi Mobile Cinema, because in the second-hand markets where a lot of phones thrown away from the First World were sent to Pakistan, to Karachi, those phones were kind of rescued and opened up by these corner stores that exist in Karachi and played around with, the camera of one taken and put in the phone of another. And these phones that were meant to be relegated to trash were kind of given the second and third and fourth life. And they sort of, in that way, they were this kind of resistance to you could say, the smooth sort of, the obsolescence of technology. So we thought, so why not take this machine that's already kind of emblematic of how we absorb technology in South Asian cities and turn them on their head and use them in ways, these makeshift jugaad, we call it jugaad ways, to do things that they were not meant for. What if we use these cell phones which seem to have this Leica camera? This particular Nokia phone had a Leica camera in it, but it was a really bad phone for anything else. We thought, okay, what if we take this phone, this particular old Nokia phone, and use it to make video? It didn't make very good photographs, but it made fantastic video. So we started using and finding it for 2,000 rupees, which is very little money. And people were using different kinds, brands of that particular phone to make stories and share, to actually create free time. I think that was one of the goals of the project, was to find a way when we were spending time in these communities, building a team of people who wanted to work together, it was an excuse to get out from our zones of comfort and privilege, to get out from our zones, our neighborhoods, our houses. It was an excuse to actually go somewhere, meet someone, do something together with kind of a shared purpose, a shared goal. And really sometimes that need for that excuse is all you really need to venture somewhere and to actually find a reason for people to let you come to them, to sort of, it's like permission. You offer something and say, are you interested in doing this? And if they are, there you go. You start beginning the nucleus of a community that wants to do something together.
Can I ask a question? So how did you send out this invitation or this prompt? How was it circulated? Who did it reach, and who responded?
Often, well, it wasn't a cold call. It would have to be, let's say, if we were interested in a neighborhood in Ibrahim Hedri, we would ask friends and family if they knew someone, academics, if they knew someone in that area. They would connect us to somebody that they had either worked with or they knew in that area. We would call that person, go visit, and introduce the project personally, and then that person would agree or not agree to being a part of the project. We'd employ that person as a community leader, and on the basis of 2 months to 6 months, however long we thought we'd be there, and then she or he would bring in their friends from the neighborhood, and then we would go there every, 3 times a week sometimes for a couple of months and hang out at that person's house with her friends and sort of build this group of people working together. So sometimes it happens very organically, sometimes it's accidental. You randomly meet someone and you're talking about the project and they say, oh, this is interesting, we want to do something like this with you. The films were very low res. They were about the everyday. Making the films ended up creating free time because people were sort of just having fun and goofing around at times in space, and it became a really great way to make friends in the city outside of the people we would normally meet. Let's see.
So what kind of films came back?
I'll show you some of the films in a second. I just wanted to share a little something about one other thing we were interested in was news media. So in 2011, 2012, there were lots of private channels producing lots of images, and there's a kind of commodification that was happening. So we thought that by doing this project, and making these low-res images, that we could kind of escape or resist a normative expectation of aesthetics. So what happens when you make low-res films? What happens when you create something that's actually not beautiful in traditional ways? And what, you know, if corporate news and cinema is very glossy, then what do archives of low-res images like ours, what do they render visible? Because one of the problems of our project is if we worked in peripheral and marginalized areas, it was very difficult to take those videos and images and bring them to places like this, or even places of privilege in Pakistan, in Karachi, because it would turn out, you know, into something that was voyeuristic and videos out of context of that neighborhood where we were sort of, you know, in the space, transforming the space and kind of turning it into a living room outside in the street, would end up looking like, you know, sort of a documentation of poverty or miserabilia, and that was not the point of the project. So we ended up not showing the project for a very long time, and there would be reporters asking us if they could come with us to these neighborhood screenings, and we wouldn't let them come with us because the neighbors were not comfortable with, you know, if it was a women's screening or if it was, you know, just an intimate screening of friends showing home videos. They didn't want people to come and you know, take pictures and put that in press. So, you know, as fascinating as this project had lots of limitations of where it can be shown and where it cannot, and that became a really important part of this machine that we ran. I want to show you some images of things that people made. This is one of the corner shops that phones get opened up in and kind of rehashed and resold. Because internet is not freely available everywhere, it's still expensive in many parts of the city, these corner shops become these incredible places where media is exchanged, and you can give somebody you know, 500 rupees and they'll fill your phone with songs or movies or, you know, whatever it is that you're looking for. Sometimes pre-written texts, jokes, romantic things, one-line sentences that you can share with friends and family. This is a video that was made by one of the porters on Kant Station. They are day laborers that come from interior Sindh and work and live on the platform until they make enough money and then head back to their villages. And many of them haven't actually seen the city, left their group of friends from the platform. This was made on Seaview, on the beach. The city is on the beach in Karachi, and so there's a really intense connection with the sea. So for those of us who are lucky enough to live near the sea, there's this incredible beach that's a working class, middle class public space that's now shrinking and getting privatized, where common people come from all over Karachi and just, you know, hang out and participate in different activities and vendors. We worked with some of the vendors there. And to give you a sense of everybody involved in the project, this is a map of Karachi that shows the different groups of people that we worked with. To the extreme right is Ibrahim Hedri, a fishing village with a lot of Burmese Rohingya and Bengali migrants, who the names of the people we collaborated with are listed there. We worked railway station on Kant with Sindhi coolies, porters, and they made this collaborative film with all of the coolies together. Seaview, the place I was just mentioning, is this incredible kind of melting pot of the city. And we worked with these vendors who run rental cars on the beach and make food and sell food. We worked in Liari, which is considered to be a kind of politically dangerous part of the city, and found school children from Kiran School to collaborate with. This was our process. Again, in Ibrahim Hedri, these are images of you know, sea salt mine, not mine, a sea salt house where, you know, sort of rendered sea salt was gathered up. And part of making work in this area was just traveling with people to their places of work or their homes, taking our laptops, you know, having the laptops get too hot and break down, and just working with the infrastructure that we had, which was not very big. We didn't have that much money, and we kind of found a way to work with this makeshift strategy that exists in Karachi to create work together. These are the coolies in Kant Station. These are kids from Liari, and these are the circles of conversation that we would have in preparation for films. This is Sea View again. And there you can see this, the rickshaw with the projector projecting images on architecture. And one of the things that we were really interested in is the facades of these walls that create the boundaries and sort of new separations in space. Sometimes they were the walls of a house. Sometimes they were the sides of a new boundary wall or a restaurant or public space. And how does ephemerally our projection manage to pierce a hole through that architecture? How does it transform that architecture and give it different layer of meaning? Whether it's the surface of trains, and how does that kind of invite different sort of viewers and participants? This is looking at some of the vernacular posters that were made by vendors on the beach. On the left was Bashir, who became our community leader for Seaview, and he has this beautiful photography stall, and he uses Photoshop with a car battery and produces these kinds of images. And essentially, if you wanted to be a tourist on the beach and wanted your photo taken, this is kind of the vernacular aesthetic that you're working with. So, in the making of this project, we were looking also at those kind of vernacular aesthetics and seeing how can we create something that's familiar using the same aesthetics, but then also a little strange. So how can you sort of turn that vernacular aesthetic into a, I can call it contemporary art. I'm not sure if many of the participants would call it that, but how do you use that as a trope for thinking about or rethinking about space? So maybe, the boundary wall of a park that's become privatized is just that, is just a wall until you have a projection on it, and it turns into a screen, or it turns into the backside of now a sitting area. So that was our kind of intervention. This ship-like thing that you're seeing is an illegal state restaurant that's sort of cutting through the beach and preventing access for people to walk across the beach. And so we did this, when we were doing this projection, we wouldn't get permission because the Defense Housing Authority said we would cause terrorists to come and bomb us, which was a very bizarre claim to make. And then they said, well, we don't own the sand, that's owned by CBC. We just own the wall, and if you're projecting on the wall, you have to get permission from us, but you have to go to CBC to get permission for the sand that you're standing on. And the lines of ownership were really blurred about who owns what. I mean, who owns the air and who owns the water, and how do you then have something? I mean, we're not hurting anybody, and all we're projecting is light, which is actually not really an intervention if you think about it from sort of legal terms. So we had to kind of navigate, and then we ended up paying 10,000 rupees for an hour, and all of the security concerns kind of disappeared. So it was really interesting, and when the screenings would happen, we didn't need any security or anybody to come and sort of create, organization. Because we were working with the vendors from the beach, they organized it and provided seating and provided this kind of ownership of the space. And this was one of the only screenings that was open to public because it was on the beach. And people from all classes sort of showed up, our friends, our professors, their friends, their professors, not professors, their buddies and families. So it was a really interesting, it was a really fascinating experience.
So you got permission from who in the end?
We got permission from Defense Housing Authority. We got a media license. So for people who shoot dramas, they get these media licenses, or for the news agencies. And it's a money-making business. So land is no longer as flexible as it was before. And in order to use, if you have a camera, if you have some kind of technology, it's seen as a medium for making money or surveillance. So, if you kind of don't fall in any of those categories, those clear categories, it's difficult to operate in public space. Even if you're doing a guerrilla practice, you can't really get access to places like Defense, which is this, even though it's a working class beach, it's still in a kind of elite neighborhood. So we didn't have problems working in other parts of the city, but whenever we worked in the somewhat elite parts of the city, we would have all these security questions about where we could, what we could do. And then there were things like this that would happen. Because the rickshaw would break down, because the projector would stall, the batteries would run out, there would be times when only the microphone would be working, and these kind of spontaneous open mic sessions would happen. One time this guy showed up in Seaview with a plate of barfi and just started talking about the incredible nature of barfi. And he's just, for about half an hour, he was selling barfi with, it was very strange. Most interesting. This was a screening we did in Liari, again, that so-called very dangerous part of the city, and there were about 300 women and children in the street. And again, I mean, some of the ways in which media sells Karachi as this dangerous place, yes, it is dangerous. I wouldn't say you should go there for vacation, but nonetheless, I mean, we had no problems working in these places because we didn't go there like tourists. We didn't go there without a head on our shoulders. So, it's important to know when and how to enter spaces, and to understand your own privilege, to understand, how to check your own missionary impulses, and how to recognize the agency of others that often the city doesn't plan for, and often the city plans out. So if you do recognize that you have agency, I have agency as a privileged person who's gone to study abroad and can speak this language, the language that we're partaking in, but when I go to a neighborhood like Liari, or if I go to Ibrahim Hedri, there is an agency that's present there, and that is something I'm not privy to. And there is a kind of mutual, sort of exchange and learning that happens in the making of relationships. And when that happens, there can be a really shared sense of being in a place together. I'll show you some of the, almost finishing. This was the rickshaw that we were given as a free donation by Sazgar, and we transformed it with local artisans. Again, looking at local vernaculars, but thinking of a sort of contemporary take. What would something like this, what did it need to be? How did this device need to look? This is it being broken down and pushed around to the right location. Just to give you a sense of the scale of one of the streets in which we did a screening. This is in Ibrahim Hedri again. And then again, how do you order a space? A motorcycle needs to pass through the crowd. This guy, taken upon himself to become the organizer of space, he just parts the crowd like this, and the cycle goes through the middle, and there's no, that kind of hyper-organization of space does not happen. But things work in our own way.
Thank you, Yaminay. We've been getting red signs.
Okay. All right.
So sorry to.
Okay.
Once the film started, but maybe we can come back to that in the discussion, like the film part. Wow. Sorry, we have to see this bookmark. Thank you very much.